Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 1001 just came out, and this was a chapter that absolutely delivered on what most of us have wanted to see, at least from the action phases of Wano. This was the type of battle that most of us have been waiting for at the climax of Wano. Great action, great interactions, great double spreads, all around 10 out of 10 chapter for a battle scene. And we're not going to talk about the raid failing and stuff like that, or the possibility of that, at least till the end of Act 3 in my chapter reviews. You guys know what I believe, but from here on, we're just going to be living in the moment, enjoying each one of these battle chapters for what they are. So, Oda 100% delivered in a lot of ways. We're going to get to that over the course of this review. To start with, I just want to talk about that one panel that, I'm sure will be posted around and shared a lot, which is Luffy with the silhouettes of Shanks, Roger, Rocks, Odin, and Whitebeard in the background, and Kaido seeing them and recognizing Luffy as potentially one of those people of that caliber. Basically people that Kaido respects and believes can fight with him, can be toe-to-toe with him, the characters that Kaido believes have a chance at actually beating him. So, one, power scaling and stuff aside, whatever you think this means, the fact that Kaido excluded some people, included some people, Shanks, Mihawk, Dragon, kinda, etc., etc. Ignoring who Kaido saw there, we got the gist of what Kaido is seeing in Luffy. Very interesting to me, by the way, that he saw Rocks in Luffy's silhouettes, because because that's not who you would imagine, that's not exactly who you would imagine seeing as Luffy being a sort of successor of. But obviously Kaido's viewing it more so from a who he respects in terms of strength perspective. But it's just very interesting to me that, you see the protagonist with, we've all seen images of this before where you see a protagonist with shades of the characters that he's going to surpass, or his successors, or the people who came before him, etc. behind him. We've all seen that image, but it was just very interesting to me to see the protagonist with Rox's silhouette behind him. Obviously, again, that doesn't really mean anything in terms of Luffy carrying on Rox's legacy. It was just interesting that he was an inclusion to that image, because that tells us more about Kaido than anything else. Because, in Kaido's mind, all of these people are grouped together by one category at the very least, which is they are worthy of his respect. So I'm very interested to see more of what goes on in Kaido's mind, what he values, etc. as this arc goes on. I can't wait for his backstory, which we will definitely get as we got Big Mom's backstory, Doflamingo's backstory, etc. But that panel aside, just in general across the board with this chapter, one of the ways that Oda delivered is something that I think a lot of us had started to... I'd seen some people starting to say that, One Piece is inconsistent with its power system or its power scaling and stuff like that, which is just kind of, reactionary takes, because we got a lot of clarification. When it's time for Oda to break stuff down and explain what's going on, he delivers on that. So, for example, the number of things that happen over the course of this chapter, first of all, Future Sight. Yes, with this chapter, we can basically take it as when Luffy is calm and focused, he is probably using Future Sight. He doesn't have to spell it out each time. Here, he happened to comment on it, and we could see that the difference between right now and chapter 923, when he first fought Kaido, was that right now, Luffy is pretty much as calm as he's ever been. This is the most composed we've seen Luffy maybe ever. When it comes down to fighting the boss, at least very close. This is a very, very composed, Pirate King-esque Luffy that's walking up to face Kaido and Big Mom. So that versus the pissed off, rage-fueled Luffy that we saw earlier in chapter 923, where Luffy couldn't bother dodging at all because he couldn't even see with Future Sight. But not only did it clarify that, so it clarified the difference between those two interactions, it also clarifies that, yes, we as the reader should be assuming that Luffy, when he is calm, when he is kind of being cognizant of what's going on and who's in front of him and what he should be doing, he is going to be using Future Sight. He doesn't need to comment on it every single time. Beyond that, it also clarifies that even though Luffy was not using Future Sight the first time, that's not the only reason he got hit. Kaido is also an extremely fast character, and we should view him as an extremely fast character. That was not just a result of Luffy being angry and upset. Kaido is very fast, and it's hard to avoid getting hit by him if he wants to hit you. That's established. Then Ryo, the amount of things that Oda clarified in terms of Ryo, who has it, right? It's not just Luffy. It is just Luffy out of the Supernova group. And it is also just a rare ability of that caliber, the second level of... We shouldn't call it Ryo, because I know Ryo is actually just a general term for hockey that people in Wano use, but for fan purposes, we're all fans of the series. We've all started using the word Ryo to refer to advanced armament hockey. There's two levels of Ryo, right? At the very least, that second level of Ryo, where the hockey actually penetrates the opponent, that is something that we understand that Kaido views as rare. Because Kaido views, okay, Luffy can hit me, there's very few people who actually have that ability to be able to damage me, and that's when we see all those silhouettes and everything like that. that doesn't necessarily mean that, like, a lot of other characters don't have that level. We, for example, saw that the admirals in Marineford, at the very least, they have that first level of Rio where you can create a barrier. Three of them stood together and blocked Whitebeard's Quake attack. With that, we saw Rio pre-time skip, at least of the first level. But the second level, that is something that is probably just rarer, unless you're like one of Odin's Red Scabbards, in which case everybody just gets the second level of Rio. But that aside, right? We got it established that yes, it is very rare in the world. It was fittingly like shocking for Kaido that all of Odin's Red Scabbards can use it, because in Kaido's mind, very few people can use it. And on top of that, the other supernovas that we have up here with Luffy, who are all supposed to be comparable to Luffy in strength to some degree. Okay, Zoro Killer, I won't get into that. I mean, I guess at the very least, Kid is being portrayed in that, you know, in that ilk. Kid doesn't have this advanced level of armament haki. Law doesn't have it. Zoro and Killer, who both took shots at Kaido, they don't have it. That clarifies a big point, which people were talking about. Does Zoro have Rio? Because, you know, that second level of Rio. Does Zoro have it? Because the description of it perfectly matches what Zoro showcased in Alabasta against Mr. One. So, clarified a good deal of what we're supposed to think of in terms of this second level of advanced armament haki, how rare it is. No, characters like Kid, Law, Zoro, Killer, they don't just randomly pick it up out of nowhere. Like, the fact that Luffy went out of his way to learn it is a big deal. It's not just going to be abundantly found everywhere, even though the Red Scabbards happen to have it, right? But that's just their sort of niche specialty. So that's a big clarification. Then on the flip side, something you can apparently just pick up if you're a talented swordsman is the ability to cut fire. It's good to know that Zoro can now do that. For a while, I thought that that might just be a function of Rio, the ability to cut elements, like that second advanced, you know, level of armament haki. Maybe Kinemon can cut elements because he has that, but no, that's separate, because Zoro can't cut Kaido, but he can cut fire. That's good to know. Top of that, Enma. We get at least a little bit of a hint here that Enma is, we get a little bit of a hint here that Zoro is relying on Enma a little bit to, I don't know about boost his power, but he's trying to draw power from Enma. My understanding was that Enma draws power from you. I don't necessarily like it, that it seems like Enma is actually some sort of automatic boost for Zoro. I would prefer if Zoro just improves his swordsmanship skill, and he, you know, getting higher grade swords is more so just getting tools to match the skill of, like, the user, rather than a tool being used to boost the ability of the user beyond what they normally are. So depends on how you feel about the Enma situation, but it did give us a hint towards what direction that might be headed. And then lastly, Killer. I know there have been debates about, like, is Killer not strong enough because Zoro already beat him? This at least opens up that ambiguity that lots of fans were citing, that, like, well, Killer wasn't in his right state of mind or anything like that. What Oda drops in is that, well, at least Killer seems to think that he would have done better, maybe even won, probably not, if he had his actual weapons. And, you know, that's a fair argument I guess Killer could put up. Like, if Zoro had to fight with, like, you know, random assortment of, like, knives or something like that, then he'd probably be pretty upset. I mean, look at Zoro right now. He's talking about, like, even this super fancy special sword I got, that's not good enough yet, or I'm not using it well enough yet. So, stuff like that, at least Killer seems to believe it matters. So, we got general clarification on a lot of, a lot of power scaling, or at least power system sort of dynamics going on in One Piece that Wano had opened up. So this should close the book, or at least give clarification for a lot of things. I don't want to see any more, like, complaints about Future Sight, complaints about, like, who has Rio, or how hard is it to pick up Rio, stuff like that. Or even, like, Zoro versus Killer. Zoro definitely could have beaten Killer, even Killer was at full power, stuff like that. Oda's kind of clarifying a lot of these aspects, right? So, that stuff aside, one of the biggest reasons, I think my favorite aspect of the chapter, besides the double-page spreads, was just the interactions between the three supernovas. So, okay, so the comedy, first of all, I thought that this was actually one of the funniest One Piece scenes that we've gotten in recent times. Oda's had some good gags going throughout Onigashima. I'd say mostly with Luffy climbing up the stairs, but I think Oda's had some good gags thrown in throughout Wano in general. But I think this was one of the first, like, laugh out loud moments that I've had in a while with One Piece. Like, legitimately laugh out loud moments. Just the like, in the context of them facing off against two Yonko, considered probably the two strongest pirates, or just about, in the entire world, considering what they're trying to do, considering that they're having these petty squabbles and stuff in the face of that, and, like, it's to the point that they're all so proud that even just Luffy's basic childish taunting of, okay, well, whoever gets hit by this fireball is a scrub. And all of them, like, Law and Kid included, who should be well beyond at, like, simplistic, childish little competitions like that in the face of the most serious battle of their lives. All three of them play into it. They're like, well, I don't want to be a scrub, so I'm not getting hit by that fireball. I love that moment. In general, I love the interactions that they had throughout this chapter, particularly because, and I was trying to put my finger on it, why I enjoyed the interactions between these three supernovas so much, even though, like, we've seen stuff like this in plenty of other series, you know, rivals bickering and stuff, and, like, even when they're supposed to be working together, like, saying, like, I'm gonna be the best, no, I'm gonna be the best, etc., right? It's nothing crazy new. I think just what I like about it in One Piece and why it feels a little different to me is the fact that it's not like the three of them are rivals, but it's not like they've come up together in the same setting or anything like that, right? Like, it's not like they all came from the same school or academy or something like that. It's not like they're in a tournament. It's not like they regularly interact with each other that much. I think it's more so, to me, the fact that One Piece, the entire story so far, it's a journey. And these are all characters that have come, like, they've all traveled and had to overcome many individual obstacles in their own particular journeys. And it's a journey that's a funnel, with everyone getting to one final point where basically you do get out at the top. But to me, it's just the fact that knowing that Kid, Law, and Luffy, this isn't like a regular system where, like, rivals naturally, I guess, develop or are forced to develop. It's more so the fact that, like, they all have the same goal, and they've all gotten here in different ways. They've all gotten through a very, you know, brutal, grueling, taxing journey and overcome many things to finally be at this stage. It's not something that's crazy different from other rivalries, but it's just a different feel to me that, you know, we saw these guys 500 chapters ago standing together. This was the first time that we finally met them all together. You know, Law and Kid had Luffy, Law, and Kid together and everything like that. The first time they interacted was 500 chapters ago. They didn't really meet up that much. Obviously, Luffy and Law did through circumstance, but they went their separate ways. They were all being hunted at that time. They all had to overcome separate obstacles. Their stories intertwined occasionally. Luffy and Law's obviously, like, a little more directly after a certain point, but they all had to take different journeys and overcome different obstacles to finally meet back up at this top, you know, this final stage that they talked about all those chapters back. It just feels a little different to me. I don't know if I clarified that well. Maybe I could do it more with a scripted video, but it's just a sense of the ladder that they had to all climb through different avenues to get to the same place, and then be able to have these same interactions that they were having 500 chapters ago, when they were still just small fry, still just trying to make their way in the world. And now, as it was quoted at the end of the chapter, whoever wins this battle is going to be one step closer to becoming Pirate King. That objective that they all talked about way back when. It's just cool. I think it's the scattered aspect of their rivalry, in that, like, it's not like Luffy and Kid have been butting heads frequently. Like, they've come from totally different angles, different directions, had different successes, different failures, and they did somehow both end up at the same place, facing the same final obstacle to becoming Pirate King. Interesting to me. I don't know if you guys feel that same way, but I just love that whole interaction. And the double page spreads that we got after that. Okay, so we finally got a look at Kid's punk rotten, this ability that he's been talking about. At the very least, we saw him use it along with Law and Luffy against that ship. I really, really, really like the design of it. It feels... I won't say it's like any... Like, I think we all saw a mech coming from Kid. We all saw some sort of mech design coming from Kid. But I think at least the sort of piratey... delinquent sort of vibe you get from, like, the face of it, you know, the face I'm talking about, like the skull sort of symbol at the front. It just feels like very Eustace Kid. It's not just like a generic mech. Maybe it's a little generic mech, but it's not just, like, it's got some character to it that I feel fits with the, you know, the persona that Kid's bringing to the table. So I enjoyed that aspect. I still feel like out of the 5 supernova we see attacking here, I still feel like Killer feels like the odd man out. I'm not talking about in terms of strength. He just never felt like a particularly significant supernova to me over the course of the story. I would actually put him towards the bottom in terms of significance I'd felt about this character in the context of the story. But obviously, you know, the Killer is part of the second most significant of the supernova crews, which is the Kid Pirates. So he's gonna play a role here. I guess this is where we're gonna get to see more of Killer. You guys also may know my beliefs about what could happen to Killer, which still stand. For any OG fans, you might remember that, but we won't talk about that here. Regardless, Killer feels like the odd man out a little bit. Luffy, Law, and Kid all make sense. I also feel like Law might be like the, the 90-pound weakling of the bunch, I guess. Not out of those three, because, Luffy's Luffy. He's come so ridiculously far. Like, Luffy was already miles ahead of Law as of Dressrosa, and like Kid, it feels like is being portrayed as right there with Luffy. So I'm just like, Law's just coming in with with room, tact. It looked like he was dropping a bunch of rocks on Kaido. I'm like, at least Kid had like a plan. Like Kid was like, okay, I can't break your skin, but maybe I could crush you to death or something. Law's like, these rocks, they're gonna teach you a lesson. But one other thing I like, though, again, along the lines of like Oda being very cognizant of what he's doing with, the power scaling, etc. Power scaling, how the interactions go to make everything make sense and have absolute clarity for the reader. I like the fact that it was made clear that, again, Luffy is the only one that can actually damage Kaido right now. And I assume by extent Big Mom, because Big Mom also has that persona or that characteristic of being practically undamageable unless she's in a emotionally compromised situation or emotionally vulnerable situation, I should say. But I like that didn't affect, that didn't mean that like Kid and Law are just like, they're just gonna take swings randomly. I like that Oda made sure to add in those clarification lines of Kid saying, I can't do this, I can't do that Rio stuff, I can't damage you physically, but I'm still gonna try and crush you. That's a different angle to come at it with. So it's acknowledging kind of, like, otherwise it would feel just a little bit random that, okay, Luffy's the only one that can actually hurt him, but everybody else is just gonna take swings anyway. Obviously Zoro and Killer had to realize that this chapter. But I like the fact that Law says, well, I'm a surgeon, I can probably damage you from inside a different way or something along those lines, and Kid saying I can crush you. I just generally felt like Oda was very on top of every aspect. Like, there's just across the whole board with this chapter, it felt like there was a lot of clarity combined with a lot of good interactions combined with just amazing action double page spreads. Because I'm talking about the Supernova double page spread. What about Kaido and Big Mom? That looked amazing. I think the only thing I would say is that I think if there was a way, obviously it doesn't make sense, but for Big Mom to look bigger, to feel less like she didn't. Oda's towing the line here between making Big Mom feel like a sidekick to Kaido versus making it feel like they're twin bosses. And obviously Kaido can be the 1A to Big Mom's 1B. I think that's how we all look at it. That at the end of the day, this is Kaido's the big boss, but Big Mom is that 1B in terms of just how threatening she is. But I do think that we risk a little bit occasionally the sense that Big Mom is the sidekick. It's not a Batman Robin situation, is what I don't think, right? It's not like Kid and Killer, right? This is, again, 1A, 1B. I hope Oda keeps that dynamic up. It feels like he usually goes back to that and reestablishes that, look, we should view it, like, there's even quotes throughout Onigashima, it's like there's two Kaidos. I think that's a much more effective, threatening, high-stakes feeling than being like, it's Kaido and then big meme, which sometimes things can fall into, basically, when, Oda wants to play her for a gag or something along those lines. Not that those gags are bad. I don't want to get into any of that. I'm just saying, in the panel, it does feel like Kaido is the big threat. If there was some way to, like, frame it so Big Mom looked like a little bigger or something like that, that's probably just a nitpick complaint. It's not even a complaint. But that's basically it. I think it's awesome seeing the two Yonko against the 5 Supernova. I hope more Supernova make their way up. And I think we will have to wait till Act 3 to find out what the big tragedy of the chapter, big tragedy of Wano is. So I will talk to y'all later.